Beles, we're talking about the Chabad rabbi who was killed among who was among those
Uh-huh.
who were killed on the first night of Hanukkah in Australia
Mm-hmm.
in a terrorist attack. Um, yeah, he was a very special man. He actually spearheaded a amazing initiative in terms of the Noahide laws and getting non-Jews involved in creating a more moral and ethical world.
Did you
So,
know him?
not extremely well, but yes, I did know him. Very special man. Like always, extremely positive, upbeat, very charismatic. Uh, just all around a great guy.
How's Nakama?
She's still pregnant.
Somebody.
Yeah. So if I get a cold, then I'll be out of here. But for now, all is still quiet. Um, so let me ask you guys, what is the Jewish response to a tragedy like this?
Prayer.
Prayer? Anyone else?
Resolve not to let it intimidate us.
Absolve not to let it intimidate us.
Which of course is their goal.
Right? Zalman?
Well, the Christian response would be forgiveness, but I'm not sure if that's really what our ethics say.
You know what our ethics say?
But
Our ethics say that it's up to God to forgive the terrorist, and it's our job to make the meeting happen.
Well put.
Yeah, so of course, yes, we pray for the souls of the departed, the families of departed. We pray for the recovery of those who have been wounded. We pray for ourselves and everyone else around the world that similar things should not take place, God forbid. We do not let it intimidate us because what they're trying to do is trying to stamp out Jews and Judaism. And if we cower and hide, then we're giving in to them.
That would not be the Maccabee way.
Sorry?
And that would certainly not be the Maccabee way.
That would not be the Maccabee way. Correct. And even more than that, we're going to take a step further and we add an increase in light, in joy, and in public events. So make sure you light your menorah every night. If you have any friends who might not light a menorah, make sure they light a menorah. If they need a menorah or candles, we have plenty. And make sure to show up to as many public menorah or Hanukkah events as you can. We're having ours on Sunday. I'm sure there are many others around. I wish there was a website. I actually had a dream of doing it, but it was too late for this year. Of all the Broward County, or maybe even we could do for the whole South Florida, all the Hanukkah events.
I heard on Sunday night, I heard the celebration. My terrace faces the synagogue on Invery,
Okay,
and I could hear them celebrating.
very good. Yeah, so attend as many public displays of Jewish pride as you can, and we're going to keep on marching. We're going to keep on going forward. We're going to keep, and we won't stop until Mashiach comes. Let's start with the blessing that we make before we learn Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
Share,
kiddushanu
Kishanu,
b'mitzvosav
Mitzvah,
V'tivanu al
Al
Rei
Ve
Sora.
Sora.
Okay, you have a Hanukkah cookbook. Look at that. Okay. So now we're up to what requires a minion. So we said that a little kid could be counted as the 10th for a zimun. And if we remember from a few weeks ago, the difference between whether you have 3 men or 10 men when it comes to the zimun is whether you invoke God's name during that invitation or not. Then, now that we're talking about a minion already, we're going to talk about a minion. Okay. With regard to the laws of joining a minion, Rav Huna said, 9 plus the ark, in which the Torah scrolls are stored, join to form a quorum of 10. Anybody have a question about that?
Wait a minute. 9 plus is R.
I mean, the ark counts as one. I've never heard that before.
No, neither have I. So how, well, that, we always demand 10 people. That, according to this, 10 men. According to this, we only need 9. With the ark is there.
Right. Very good. Your question is, what do you mean? I've never heard of this. We've never used the ark as a 10th man for the minion. And besides, the ark can't answer a main. And that's exactly what Rav Nachman said to him. Is an ark a man, that it may be counted with a quorum of 10?
You can't give it.
Rather, Rav Huna was saying like this: 9 who appear like 10 may join together. If you have 9 people, but it looks like there's 10 people, then it works for a minion. And there was a disagreement over what he meant by that. Some said that the halacha is as follows: 9 appear like 10 when they are gathered. If everyone's near each other, then it looks like there's 10 men. And some said exactly the opposite: 9 appear like 10 when they're scattered. And if everyone's in different places in the room, then it looks like there's more people. So where does it look like a bigger crowd? If everyone's gathered together around the table, or if everyone's dispersed inside the room? The disagreement being which formation creates the impression of a greater number of individuals. Similarly, Rav Ami said, if you have 2 people on Shabbat, you can have a zimun. And Rav Nachman asked the same question again: is Shabbat a person that it may be counted in a zimun? Rather, Rav Ami said, if you have 2 Torah scholars who hone each other's intellect in halachic discourse, if they're great Torah scholars, then they two, just the 2 of them, can join together, and they're considered 3. Rav Chisda pointed to an example of 2 such Torah scholars who hone each other's intellect, and he said, for example, me and Rav Sheshes. And Rav Sheshes said, for example, me and Rav Chisda. Again, as in all matters of Jewish observance, we don't take any final law from the Talmud, and you got to speak to your local competent Orthodox rabbi or consult the Code of Jewish Law to find out what is the final saying. With regard to a minor's inclusion in a zimun, Rabbi Yochanan said, a mature minor. What's a mature minor? So let me ask you this. Before we get into this discussion, we're going to need a little bit of a background here. At what age does a child become an adult in Jewish law?
13.
13 for a
boy, 12 for a girl.
For a boy and 12 for a girl. But the truth is that the number 13 is an arbitrary age. And we go by 13 because that is, or at 13 and 12, because that is the usual time when the actual formation of the human body begins to change. However, the truth is that when the child hits puberty, that is when they are considered an adult. So if there are 2 hairs in the pubic area, that is the when a child becomes an adult. But that number was codified as 12 for a girl and 13 for a boy. And the question is, what happens if they're showing signs of physical maturity, but they're not yet bar mitzvah, right? You have a boy with a beard, and he's still 12. So let's read this again. With regard to a minor's inclusion in a zimun, Rabbi Yochanan said, a mature minor, meaning one who is still a minor in terms of age, but is displaying signs of puberty, can be included in a zimun. That opinion was also taught in a brisa. A minor who grew 2 pubic hairs, a sign of puberty, is included in a zimun, and one who did not grow 2 hairs is not included in a zimun. And one is not exacting with regard to a minor. What does it mean that we're not exacting when it comes to a minor? It seems to be very clear. If they have 2 hairs, then you can include them. If they don't have 2 hairs, you cannot include them. So what is being added over here that you don't have to be too careful when it comes to a minor? What do you think?
Well, not exactly too, just generally speaking, if he appears to be, if he looks like he problem may have, when like if he has a little peach fuzz over his lip or something like that. I mean, you don't have to actually examine him to count what's down there.
Okay, let's see. The Gemara comments, this brisa itself is difficult. You said that minor who grew 2 hairs, yes, he is included. And one who did not grow 2 hairs, no, he is not included. And then it taught that one is not exacting with regard to a minor. What does this last clause come to include? Is it not? Oh, look at that. We finished page 47b. Is it not to include a mature minor? So you would explain the brisa as follows. A minor who grew 2 hairs is included in a zimun, and we are not exacting with regard to a minor to ascertain whether or not he has reached the age of majority. In other words, what matters is the hairs, not the age. I think that's what he's saying. Yeah. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be careful about his age. It doesn't matter if he's 13 or if he's 12 and a half or 12. But if, I guess, his father or the doctor or whoever it was, the medical professionals that did the examination, then it doesn't matter if he's still under 13 or if he's over 13. What matters is the signs of physical maturity.
What about the other way? Suppose he's 13.
Sorry?
What about the other way? Suppose you have a 13-year-old who just turned 13, but hasn't started puberty yet. Doesn't have it.
That's a very good question. So what we're going to see is that there's 3 different stages, and depending on regarding which laws is going to depend on what matters. So we have a kid who's less than 13 but is showing signs of puberty, or in the case of a girl, less than 12. You have someone who is 13 and showing signs of puberty. You have someone who is over 13 but is not showing signs of puberty. So those are all going to be 3 distinct categories. With regards to most things, and especially nowadays, we just go by 13. With regard to certain things, it'll go by the physical maturity, and with regard to certain things, it'll go just by the age, even if the physical maturity is not there. The Gemara concludes that the halacha is not in accordance with any of these statements. Rather, the halacha is in accordance with this one statement that Rav Nachman said, a minor who knows to whom one recites a blessing is included in a zimun. If the kid is old enough to understand that we're praying to God, then they can be part of the zimun. I made a blessing earlier. I gotta take a sip of tea. The Gemara relates that Abaya and Rava, when they were little children, they were seated before Rabbah. Rabbah said to them, "To whom does one recite blessings?" They said to him, "To God, the All-Merciful." Rabbah asked them, "And where does he live?" Rava pointed to the ceiling. Abaya went outside and pointed toward the heaven. Rabbah said to them, "You will both become sages." It is as the popular saying goes, a cucumber can be recognized from its blossoming stage. Similarly, a great person can be recognized even from a young age. Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shela, said in the name of Rav, if 9 people ate grain and one of them ate vegetables, so you don't have 10 people who ate grains, you don't have 10 people who ate what we're going to consider a meal, but one of them ate vegetables. So he was eating with them, but not a meal, a snack. They can join and form a zimun of 10. Rabbi Zera said, I raised the dilemma before Rav Yehuda. What is the ruling? What happens if 8 ate grain and 2 ate vegetables? May they
But a
join
zimun
together?
is 3.
Sorry?
A zimun is 3.
Oh, very good. Yes. So a zimun is 3, but if you have 10, then you add the word of God, the name, the word of God's name, the extra word, God's name, into the zimun. So instead of saying, we will bless the one from whom we ate, we would say, we will bless the Lord, the one from whom we ate. So the question is, what happens if you have 9 people who ate bread or, grains, and 1 who ate vegetables? So that we know that Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shelas, quoted Rav as saying that if you have 9 people who ate grains and 1 ate vegetables, they can have a zimun of 10 and recite God's name in the zimun. But what happens if you have 8 with grain and 2 eating vegetables? Can they join together? What if you have 7 eating grain and 3 eating vegetables? So he said to me, there is no difference. 8, 7, 9. So long as you have a large majority who ate bread, it's okay. And the others were eating. The others had to be eating. If they were sitting around and not eating, they cannot be included in the zimun. I certainly had no dilemma with regard to 6, as it was clear to me that 6 are insufficient to warrant a zimun. Rabbi Yirmiyah said to him, you did well that you had no dilemma with regard to 6, but for the opposite reason. There, in the case of 7 or 8, what is the reason they can form a zimun of 10? Because there is a majority of those dining who ate grain. Here too there is a majority. So if there is a majority, you have 6 people eating grain and 4 people eating not grain, then if you have the majority, you have the majority. Why does it matter if it's 6 or 7? Rabbi Zera, however, held that
So these rabbis did not approve of veganism.
did not approve. Why? They don't eat grain? Vegans don't eat grain?
No.
I didn't know that.
Hmm.
Isn't grain vegetation?
Gluten, all that stuff. Just vegetables and fruit.
And cabbage, right?
Well, that's a vegetable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. How do they get their strength? Quinoa and kale?
I don't know, vitamins. I don't know.
I don't know either. We're not going to ask what kind of factories the vitamins are made in, and we're not going to ask where the vitamins come from. Okay, yeah. The rabbis were big into eating meat. So Rabbi Zera held that when it comes to a zimun, we require an obvious majority. So it has to be a large majority. I don't know if you have that sometimes in voting, that you can't have 51%. You need to have a larger majority of 60 or 70%, depending on what's going on. So when it comes to a zimun, you need an obvious majority. Therefore, contrary to the opinion of Rabbi Yirmiyah, it was clear to him that 6 to 8 grain are insufficient to form a zimun. Okay. Aha. Okay. Have you ever heard of King Yanai?
No.
No.
Well, you're about to hear a little bit of a glimpse into his life. He was a Jewish king. What do you think? You think he was a good king or a bad king?
Well, the next sentence says he executed the sages, so I'm gonna go with bad.
Yeah, very good. The Gemara relates King Yanai and the queen ate bread together, and since Yanai had already executed all the sages, there was no one to recite the grace after meals blessing on their behalf. He's like, oh, shoots, I forgot the blessing. What am I going to do now? So he said to his wife, I guess she wasn't as evil as he was, who will provide us with a man to recite the blessing on our behalf? And she said to him, swear to me that if I bring you such a man, you will not harass him. He swore. And she brought her brother Shimon ben Shattach. Now, Shimon ben Shattach was a giant of a man in terms of his spiritual standing as well as his Torah knowledge, and he was a confident man as well as a man of strong convictions. And he didn't care to flatter anyone. He just said things as they were. And he was the sister of the queen. Sorry, he was the brother of the queen. So the queen brought him in, said, yeah, this is one of the great sages. He was actually the head rabbi of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court at the time. And she's figured, he can probably recite the grace after blessings. She sat him between the king's throne and her throne. The king said to him, do you see how much honor I am according you? He responded, it is not you who honors me, rather the Torah honors me. I don't need your honor. I have the honor of the Torah. As it is written in Proverbs regarding the Torah, extol her and she will exalt you. She will bring you honor when you embrace her. Yanai said to his wife, you see that he does not accept authority. Oh, this is not going well, right? They gave Shimon ben Shattach a cup of wine over which to recite grace after meals. He said, how shall I recite the blessing? Shall I say, blessed is he from whom Yanai and his companions have eaten? I have not eaten anything, so I can't say grace after meals. So he just drank the cup of wine. They gave him another cup, and over the second cup he recited grace after meals, because by drinking the first cup of wine, he had now joined the other diners in their dining, and was therefore eligible to recite grace after meals on their behalf. And I guess he got out of there unscathed with the grace of God. L'chaim. With regard to the story, Rabbi Abba, the son of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, said that Rabbi Yochanan said, that which Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach did, reciting grace after meals on their behalf, he did on his own. Basically, he came up with this on his own. This is not in accordance with the accepted halacha. Because Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, one who recites grace after meals cannot fulfill the obligation of others to recite it unless he eats an olive bulk of grain. So a zimun is different than exempting other people of their obligation to recite the grace after meals. The Gemara raises an objection based on what was taught in the Brisa. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, one who entered and reclined together with those who were dining, even if he only dipped with them a small bit of food in spicy brine that was brought before them, and ate with them only a single dry fig, he can join them. This Brisa demonstrates that one need not necessarily eat grain to recite grace after meals on their behalf. Let's look at this brisa, the wording of this brisa, and see if we can figure out what the Gemara is going to answer. This brisa seems to be saying that even if you didn't eat any grain, you can still join them. And we're using that as a proof that you don't need to eat grain in order to exempt the rest of the diners from their obligation to recite their own grace after meals. They can just recite Amen after your blessing. Who wants to tell us why this scenario is different than the other scenario?
Well, the other scenario, they said you had to eat grain.
But here it says that even if you only ate a single dry fig, you can join them. So you don't have to have any grain.
Agree with each other.
Sorry?
So, in great Talmudic tradition, they disagree with each other.
Oh, okay, I hear you. But let's look at the words carefully. The word says he joins them. That means he can join them. It doesn't mean that he can exempt them. He can't satisfy their obligation. The Gemara, let's read that inside. The Gemara responds, indeed, he joins them. He can bless together with them. He can be part of the Zimun, but he cannot satisfy the obligation of the many unless he has eaten an olive bulk of grain. Similarly, this halacha was also stated that Rav Chana bar Yehuda said in the name of Rava, even if he only, wow, that was a quick page. On to 48b. Dipped with them a small bit of food in brine and ate with them only a single dry fig, he joins them. But to satisfy the obligation of the many, he does not satisfy their obligation unless he eats an olive bulk of grain. Rabbi Chana bar Yehuda said in the name of Rava that the halacha is, if one ate a vegetable leaf and drank a cup of wine, he joins the diners. However, to satisfy the obligation of the others, he does not satisfy their obligation until he eats an olive bulk of grain. Okay. The grace after meals that we recite, where does it come from and what is its origin? What is its history and when did it come? Let's move into the next section of the page. With regard to the origins of the 4 blessings of grace after meals, Rav Nachman said, Moses instituted for Israel the first blessing of who feeds all, when the manna descended from them and they needed to thank God. Joshua instituted the second blessing, the blessing of the land, when they entered the Holy Land of Israel. I'm just going to pause here for a second. There's this great comedian, Yochai Sponder, that I found recently. I was telling you about him last week at the Wednesday class, I think. And he says about the Greeks. So Matisyahu and his 5 sons, right? So Judah Maccabee looks at his dad and he says, Dad, I have an idea. We're going to fight the Greeks. And his father said, that's a wonderful idea, but you know that for every one of us, there's 10,000 of them. And Judah Maccabee said, yeah, but I know the land. And that's how we're going to win. And what we see from here is that even before 1948, the Jews knew the land. Joshua instituted the blessing of the land when they entered the land of Israel. David and Solomon instituted the third blessing, who builds Jerusalem, in the following manner. It was David and Solomon. David was who was the father and who was the son?
Well, David was father.
David was the father, Solomon was the son. Very good. David and Solomon instituted the third blessing, who builds Jerusalem, in the following manner. David instituted on Israel, your people, and on Jerusalem, your city, when he conquered the city. And Solomon instituted on the great and holy temple, as he was the one who built the temple. The fourth blessing, which is the blessing that is not of biblical importance, but rather of rabbinic importance, the fourth blessing, they instituted the blessing, who is good and does good at Yavne, in reference to the slain Jews of the city of Beitar at the culmination of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. Does anyone know what happened to the Jews of Beitar during the Bar Kokhba rebellion?
Was it that Masada?
Sorry?
Was that Masada?
No, I don't believe so. Bar Kokhba was a Jewish, I guess, governor, a powerful man who was repelling the Romans, and he was um he was a very great man, a Torah scholar. In fact, so this is in the times of the Mishnah, and many of the sages at the time believed that he would be the Mashiach. Eventually, the city of Beitar was under siege, and the Romans were on the outside, and inside there was a lot of tension because back then, I don't know, I know this is going to sound strange to you, but back then the Jewish people didn't agree on things. Um, weird. And there were people who did not want to see the Jewish people succeed. There were Jews who did not want to see the Jews succeed in their war against the Romans. There was one old rabbi, a very old rabbi, who was the mentor of Bar Kokhba, or one of the mentors of Bar Kokhba, if I'm remembering correctly. And there was a young zealot who was on the other side, the side that was for giving in, surrendering, and turning themselves into the Romans. And this guy saw the old rabbi was in the middle of praying, and so he thought it would be a great idea to go over and start whispering in his ear, pretending he's telling secrets and conspiring with the rabbi. And Bar Kokhba saw this, and instead of investigating, he got very angry, and I think he slapped the rabbi or something. I don't remember exactly what happened, but he killed the rabbi, and that was again the beginning of the demise of Bar Kokhba. He ended up being captured and killed by the Romans. It was very sad. And then, of course, at that point, we realized that he's not the Mashiach. The Romans were very, very upset with the Jews, and when they finally conquered the city of Beitar, it said they slayed all the men, women, and children, and the blood flowed 11 kilometers out to the sea. That's like 5 miles. A lot of Jewish blood. And Hadrian did not allow the Jewish people to bury them. He actually stacked the bodies up as a fence around an orchard. A vineyard, sorry. And that's the background to this story. Let's look over here again. They instituted the blessing who is good and does good at Yavne, in reference to the slain Jews of the city of Beitar at the culmination of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. They were ultimately brought to burial after a period during which Hadrian refused to permit their burial. As Rav Masna said, on the same day that the slain of Beitar were brought to burial, they instituted the blessing who is good and does good at Yavne. Who is good, thanking God that the corpses did not decompose while awaiting burial. I think it was a period of about a year, and these bodies did not compose. And who does good, thanking God that they were ultimately brought to burial, that they were allowed to bury these Jewish people. On the topic of the blessings of grace after meals, the Gemara adds that the sages taught in a brisa that the order of grace after meals is as follows. The first blessing is the blessing of who feeds all. The second is the blessing of the land. The third is The third is who builds Jerusalem, and the fourth is who is good and does good. On Shabbat, one begins the third blessing with consolation and ends with consolation, and mentions the sanctity of the day with mention of Shabbat in the middle, and that's the paragraph number 5 that we add on our benching papers, our grace after meal papers. Rabbi Eliezer says, if one wishes to recite the supplement for the sanctity of Shabbat and the blessing of constellation, who builds Jerusalem, he recites it there. If he wants to say it in the blessing of the land, he could recite it there. In the blessing, if he wants to do it instead in the blessing instituted by the sages of Yavne, who is good and does good, he recites it there. And the rabbis say he may only recite the mention of the sanctity in Shabbat in the context of the blessing of consolation. So let's look over here at the first opinion. The first opinion is on Shabbat, which blessing do we recite the additional paragraph for Shabbat, according to this opinion that's highlighted in blue?
What's the question?
According to this opinion, the first opinion that is highlighted in the screen in blue, which blessing would you mention Shabbat?
The third.
The third, correct. And the topic of the third blessing is?
Who built Jerusalem?
Yes, that is correct. The blessing of consolation. Let's look now at the rabbi's opinion in the bottom. And the rabbis say, which blessing do the rabbis say that you're supposed to mention Shabbat?
Third.
Also the third. So can you tell me what's the difference between the first opinion and the rabbi's opinion?
I don't see any difference.
What about Chaim and Brett? Do either of you see a difference?
Mm-mm.
Really?
There's a very important word here that I'm going to highlight that appears only in the text of the rabbis, but not in the first one. What does that word mean?
Oh.
Only. Only means, are you able to say it anywhere else?
No.
No.
No. Okay, so now let's jump into the next part of the Talmud where the sages of the Talmud are going to digest this and go through what we just said. The Gemara remarks, the opinion of the rabbis is identical with the opinion of the first Tana. Both opinions hold that the mention of Shabbat is in the third blessing. And the Gemara responds, the difference between the opinion of the rabbis and the opinion of the first Tana is with regard to after the fact. They both agree that ab initio, in the first place, Shabbat should be mentioned in the third blessing. But what happens if a person was making their grace after meals and made a mistake and recited Shabbat in a different blessing? If though, back inside, if though, one inadvertently mentioned Shabbat in one of the other blessings mentioned by Rabbi Eliezer, the first Tana holds that he has fulfilled his obligation, and the rabbis emphasize that it may only be recited in the blessing of consolation. So according to the first Tana, you're supposed to say it in the blessing of consolation, but if you said it in one of the other blessings, you fulfilled your obligation. According to the rabbis, you can only say it in the blessing of consolation, and if you said it in one of the earlier blessings, you have to still say it in the blessing of consolation. And if you forgot it in the blessing of consolation, you have to go back and recite grace after meals again. You can't just recite it in the fourth blessing. The sages taught in a Tosefta. Now, again, this is not necessary. This is, okay. The sages taught in a Tosefta. Let's see if we can finish this paragraph. From where is it derived that grace after meals is from the Torah, as it is stated, and you shall eat and be satisfied, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. The Gemara explains, and you shall bless, that is referring to the blessing of who feeds all. The Lord your God, that is the Zimun blessing, in which God's name is invoked. For the land refers to the blessing of the land. Good, that is the blessing who builds Jerusalem. As it also says, the good mountain and the Lebanon, which is interpreted homiletically as referring to Jerusalem and the temple. That he gave you, that is referring to who is good and who does good. So at this point, I think we've actually learned this once before, many months ago. However, I only have a Torah source for the blessings after eating, which is the grace after meals. From where is it derived that one is obligated to recite blessings before eating? You said that it can be derived through an a fortiori inference. When one is satisfied, he is obligated to recite a blessing and thank God for food. So when you don't need food anymore, you have to thank God for giving you food. So when you're hungry and you do need food, all the more so that he should recite a blessing to offer thanks for the food that he will eat. Okay, I think we will. Yeah, let's read this one more paragraph and stop there. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says it is not necessary to interpret the verse this way. Rather, it should be understood in a slightly different manner as follows. And you shall eat and be satisfied, and you shall bless. That is the blessing of who feeds all, the first blessing. However, the Zimun blessing is derived from the verse, praise God with me, and we will exalt his name together, which is a different verse, a verse from Psalms, which is at any time that we praising God, we have to all answer in unison. So, the first part of the verse in the Torah, and you shall eat and be satisfied, and you shall bless, that refers to who feeds all. For the land refers to the blessing of the land. The good land, that refers to who builds Jerusalem, as we learned just before, that refers to the good mountain and the Lebanon, referring to the Temple Mount, Jerusalem and the temple, sorry. And they instituted the blessing who is good and does good at Yavne, and as such, it has no biblical source. However, I only have a Torah source for blessings after eating. From where is it derived that one is obligated to recite blessings before eatings? The verse states that God gave you. A blessing must be recited over food from the moment that God gave it to you, not only after you ate it. Tomorrow, we will not be having a Wednesday morning class. Please join us on Shabbat for Shabbat morning services at 10 a.m. or for Kiddush afterwards at 11:30. And please join us on Sunday afternoon at 5 p.m. for a grand Hanukkah celebration. And then next week, Thursday, we're going to be having a lunch and learn with delicious Chinese food. So please sign up for that as well. You should have received an email about those. If not, please send me a message and I will send you the links to sign up. Shabbat Shalom. Be good and look out for an email. Once the baby comes, God willing, I will be sending out an email.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Good luck.
Bye.